He was 9 years old when he told his mother he had a wife. Not that he wanted one, not that he had seen something on television and got confused. He told her very calmly over breakfast that he had a wife, that her name was Dorothy, that they had lived in a house with a green door on a street called Milner Road, that Dorothy had died before him and that he had stood at her grave in the rain, and that the grave was in a churchyard near a stone wall with a crack running through the bottom left corner. His mother put her cup down. His name was Daniel, and what came out of him over the next several months, in fragments, in dreams, in moments of sudden and disorienting clarity, was not the vague impressionistic stuff of a child's imagination. It was specific, dated, verifiable. The street name was real, the churchyard was real, the grave, when a journalist eventually went looking, was real. Daniel had never been to that town. His family had no connection to it. He had not, as far as anyone could establish, ever encountered the name Dorothy in any book, any program, any conversation that had been recorded or remembered. He was 9, he was certain, and he was right. The question that case leaves sitting in the room, the one that has occupied psychologists, neuroscientists, and philosophers for decades, is not whether Daniel was telling the truth, it is where the truth came from. Cases like Daniel's are not as rare as you might expect. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, spent 40 years collecting and documenting them, not as a believer in the supernatural, as a scientist with a methodology. He gathered over 3,000 cases from across the world, children predominantly, most of them between the ages of 2 and 7, all of them describing previous lives with a specificity that went beyond what imagination or coincidence could comfortably explain. They described names, occupations, causes of death, family members, geographic details of places they had never visited. Some of them had birthmarks that corresponded with uncomfortable precision to the wounds that killed the person they claimed to remember being. Stevenson was not a fringe figure. He was published in peer-reviewed journals. He was taken seriously by colleagues who did not share his conclusions. His methodology was rigorous enough that even skeptics acknowledged his data was difficult to simply dismiss. What nobody could agree on, then or now, was what the data meant. Because there are two possible explanations sitting at opposite ends of everything we think we know, and the truth, psychology now suspects, may be somewhere in the narrow and deeply uncomfortable space between them. The first explanation is called cryptomnesia, and it is one of the most disturbing things that memory research has ever uncovered, not because it involves past life, but because of what it reveals about how your memory works right now. Cryptomnesia is the process by which your brain absorbs information completely, in full detail, and then forgets that it absorbed it. The memory remains, the source disappears. What you're left with is a memory that feels entirely your own, felt from the inside, experienced as lived, with no trace, no signal, no footnote attached to it that says, you heard this somewhere, you read this once, someone mentioned this in a conversation you weren't fully paying attention to. The brain files it on the mind. Researchers have demonstrated this in controlled conditions. Subjects are exposed to information, briefly, incidentally, without being asked to retain it. Weeks later, they reproduce that information as their original thought, their own memory, their own idea, with full emotional ownership and zero awareness that it came from somewhere else. Now scale that up. A child grows up surrounded by conversations, television, overheard stories, books read aloud, radio in the background, a grandparent's offhand comment at a dinner table in 1987. The child's brain, which is in those early years a recording device of staggering sensitivity and almost no conscious filter, absorbs all of it, and then the source labels fall off. What remains is a vast interior landscape of memories, feelings, knowledge, and conviction, some of it genuinely lived, some of it absorbed, and no reliable mechanism for telling one from the other. For most people, this produces nothing more dramatic than occasionally believing that you had an original idea that you actually read somewhere. For some, under conditions researchers still fully don't understand, it produces something that feels from the inside exactly like remembering a different life. But here is where cryptomnesia explanation starts to strain. It works beautifully for vague cases, the ones where a child describes a previous life with broad strokes, a different country, a different time, a feeling of having been somewhere before. Those can be explained, absorbed fragment, misfiled experience, a brain doing what brains do. It works less well for Daniel, because the crack in the bottom left corner of the churchyard wall is not the kind of detail that appears in books. It is not broadcast. It is not the kind of thing that makes it into any record that a child in a different city could have incidentally absorbed. It is the kind of detail that exists only in the memory of someone who stood there. Stevenson's most rigorous cases share this quality. The details that verify are always the ones too small to have been transmitted, the ones that live only in direct experience, the ones that have no root from the world into a child's mind except through something that current neuroscience does not have a name for. This is where the research sits today, not at a conclusion, at a question. Cryptomnesia explains most of it. Most is not all. And the cases that fall outside most are the ones that keep the researchers up at night, not because they believe in reincarnation, but because they cannot find a source. And the memory without a source is, to a neuroscientist, the most unsettling thing in the world. Daniel is older now. He doesn't talk about it much anymore. The memories faded as he got older, which is consistent with almost every documented case. The window seems to close somewhere around middle childhood, as the self solidifies, as identity hardens around present life and crowds out whatever was there before. He visited Milner Road once. When he was 12, his parents drove him. He stood outside the house with the green door, which was still green, which nobody had told him, and he said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "It is smaller than I remember." He went to the churchyard, he found the wall, he found the crack. He stood at Dorothy's grave for about 10 minutes and then he walked back to the car and asked if they could stop for food on the way home. He was 12 and by every visible measure, completely fine. What he said about it later in the only interview he ever gave, at 17, was this: "It doesn't feel like my memory anymore. It feels like something I was told, like a story that happened to someone else that I somehow know by heart." Which is, when you think about it, exactly what cryptomnesia feels like from the inside, or exactly what forgetting a past life feels like. He couldn't tell which one it was, neither can the researchers. Here is what we know for certain. Your brain contains memories you don't know you have, absorbed from sources you no longer remember, filed without your permission under experiences you believe were yours, shaping how you feel, what you fear, what you love, what you're drawn to, without you ever tracing them back to where they actually came from. Some of what you believe about yourself is memory, some of it is absorption, some of it is construction. And the brain, which needs a coherent story above almost everything else, has stitched all three together so seamlessly that you cannot see the seams. You experience the result as, "This is who I am, this is what I remember, this is what happened to me." Daniel experienced the result as, "I had a wife named Dorothy. I stood at her grave in the rain. The crack was in the bottom left corner of the wall. The mechanism may be the same, the scale is different. The question of why some minds produce 9-year-olds who can find a grave in a town they have never visited, remains open, genuinely, uncomfortably, scientifically open."